And today, Mason, we get to do something that we always enjoy a little bit more than the rest of the teams in college football. We get to talk Georgia Bulldogs football, and I guess you could honestly say this is the team that brought us to make a college football channel, right? This is the team that we grew up watching, and so we love our dogs almost as much as we love college football in general. It was another successful season for the Georgia Bulldogs last year, Mason, and you know, after Georgia had won the SEC championship, dealt with the Carson Beck injury, Gunnar Stockton comes in. In my opinion, as a Georgia fan, even though there's been all the success from in 21 and 22 winning national championships, and after Georgia won that SEC championship, I felt like Georgia was just playing with house money at that point, Mason. I thought that was a great accomplishment for the team that was on hand last year. And we're going to talk about some of the deficiencies they had last year compared to what, some of the deficiencies we think they may have this year, right? And we'll talk about some of the guys that are popping in spring, some newcomers that we're really interested in, seeing how they're going to develop throughout the season. We got to talk about the returning guys and kind of what they mean for the offense, right? Are you a Gunnar Stockton guy or are you a Ryan Puglisi guy? Because personally, I feel like Gunnar Stockton has taken some strays. Personally, I throughout the offseason, I feel like there's been a ton of doubt about his ability to be able to be the number one guy on this team and take them to where they need to go. Even though we just saw him come in and literally help win an SEC championship game against one of the better teams in the country, the Texas Longhorns. There were still a lot of questions. So what is it, Mason? Are you a Puglisi guy or are you a Stockton guy?
I mean, can't you be both? Can't we be as Georgia fans nonpartisan when it comes to our quarterback situations? I mean, I like both of them. Obviously, Puglisi has the higher ceiling. I think that's pretty obvious to say as just kind of that prototypical sort of quarterback. He seems to be very mobile, huge arm. I like the idea of Puglisi in 2026, and I think that that's fine. I also look at Gunnar Stockton, and the amount of intangibles that this guy has is a perfect fit as a quarterback for a Georgia program. We saw it in Stetson Bennett in a much different way, mind you, but Stetson Bennett was probably not as talented as Gunnar Stockton in a lot of ways from an arm talent perspective. I think he's a little bit more mobile, a little bit faster, literally, than Gunnar Stockton, but as far as an intangible, as far as the team getting around the player, the quarterback, the leader of the offense, I think that there are a lot of similarities. And this Georgia team, this Georgia offense, with the pieces that they have at receiver, which we'll get into in a minute, that's all they need is a little bit of glue to hold them together, maybe some glue on their hands so they don't drop the football as much as well. And I think that this offense can really start to click. So I am a big Gunnar Stockton fan. If you go back and watch in the 2 game or 1.5 game sample size we saw from last year, the guy pretty much only made one mistake. There were a couple of bad decisions where he probably missed a read on a receiver in that Notre Dame game, but the only mistake that I can really think about, or large mistake that I can think of, is the interception that nearly cost Georgia the SEC championship, and that was a really bad throw. But
Yeah.
in that circumstance, he was kind of tossed into the fire and told to get out as best as he could, and it was a tough situation. He did absolutely everything that he could in that position. I just think going through a whole offseason as the number one, um, under a system that Mike Bobo has designed for Gunnar Stockton. Nobody knows Gunnar Stockton as a quarterback better than Mike Bobo. I mean, the family ties. As Georgia fans, you all know how close Bobo is to Gunnar Stockton. I think that goes a long way, and it also speaks to the intangibles and the leadership qualities that he has and the leadership potential that he has. Um, by all accounts, this is Gunnar Stockton's team until it's not. And it's not a knock on Ryan Puglisi, but unless Puglisi was, Caleb Williams his freshman year. I don't know that there's a quarterback necessarily that was just going to unseat Gunnar Stockton this year, and until a Tennessee or an Alabama game where maybe we've lost both of those games, and until there's a reason to pull Gunnar Stockton, I don't really see a point in even bringing up the Puglisi discussion. But we're Georgia fans. That's what we do. We talk about the backup quarterback probably more than they should be talked about.
Look, I don't know what quarterback you would have thrown in last year to Georgia's offense, and that would have just thrived with that wide receiver group. I mean, they had the dropsies, bro. I mean, I don't. Georgia isn't known for their wide receivers anyway. I mean, y'all let me know in the comment section kind of what you think about this situation. We got to move on to the next thing here, and we'll talk more about the offense though. The number one thing that pops out to me, and the number one thing that I've been reading throughout spring, Mason, and the one thing that I've been really keeping an eye on is the offensive line. It was the Ole Miss game last year was absolutely embarrassing. The Georgia's offensive throbbed by Ole Miss in that game, and it was the sole reason Georgia lost that game. And it was specifically off of the edges. The interior of the offensive line last year had some star talent. I mean, those guys are going to the NFL, man. Pretty highly rated. Ratledge and the center there as well. That should have been the strength of the offensive line, and even them, I even saw them struggle sometimes last year. But the main struggle was tackles. It was Ernest Green in and out at left tackle last year, in and out, hokey pokey with the Ernest Green, and now they've moved him over to right tackle, which I like. I think that is much more his speed. Okay, that's going to provide him a whole lot better opportunity to be successful there. We got Monroe Freeling over on the left side at tackle. So, look, I think the tackle situation is going to be a lot better this year than what it was last year. But now we've got questions on the interior of the offensive line with the departures that we just talked about. So, Drew Bobo. We just talked about Gunnar Stockton. Drew Bobo is in that same vein. He actually is a legacy player, obviously, being Mike Bobo's son, and that guy wants to be there. He's got all the attitude that it takes to be successful. I don't know if he's got the God-given ability or if he's developed more from last year. We're going to find out. We're all going to find out together. But I think Georgia is better on the bookends, and I think they're going to be worse on the interior of the offensive line. How well this offense and the run game goes and the offensive line goes is going to depend on, I think, those guys that are going to step into those interior offensive lineman roles and how well they play. I think it's that simple. I like where we're at with tackle. Ernest Green took his lumps last year, man. Everybody saw it, and it was bad. It was bad at times. But getting him over to right tackle, and now that he's got all that experience, I feel like he's going to be much more at home over that position. So I'm hearing some good things about the offensive line, and I'm also hearing some not so good things about the offensive line as well. So really interested to see how the interior offensive line shapes up for Georgia as the spring moves along.
Well, going into this spring, I think my immediate reaction and my immediate thought of this offensive line was, my gosh, you're losing Dylan Fairchild, who's going to be a top or a fifth or sixth round pick probably. Jared Wilson, Tate Ratledge, Xavier Truss, they're all going to be 2 to 4, rounds 2 to 4. That's 4 starters that you're losing, including Xavier Truss, who has been just a Swiss Army knife for this offensive line for the past three years. I mean, the guy was the sixth offensive lineman for 3 years, it seemed like, and got to start last year for the first time. And so immediately you think, what a huge hole. 80% of your starting line is gone. And then you start to look at the guys who are coming in behind them, right? You got Monroe Freeling, you got Ernest Green, you got Drew Bobo, you got Micah Morris. All 4 of those guys we saw a ton of last year. They've already gotten the snaps. They've already got the experience. And then you throw in presumably the starter right now. I know that this offensive line is going to move around, but right now seems like there's a battle going on between Bo Hughley and Daniel Calhoun. Daniel Calhoun's a redshirt freshman, massive young man who came in last year and was asked to lose some weight. It seems like he's done that, and if he's as talented as we thought he might be coming in, then that's a really good sign. That's a Tate Ratledge type player who is going to fill that right guard slot as a first year starter potentially this year. So that could be huge. But Micah Morris, he's kind of the guy who's been here the longest time. This is his 5th year with the program. Hasn't had an opportunity to start. He's kind of been a plug and play guy, but we've heard a lot about him really since he was a true freshman. So it's kind of, I think Georgia's just had an embarrassment of riches and sort of a logjam in front of him. Otherwise, he would have been starting by now. I think he's a one and done sort of deal here for Georgia as well, and a future NFL guy based on everything we've heard out of him for the past 3 years. But those 5 guys at offensive line, I think they're going to be fine. I'm worried about the depth behind them. But I'm hearing some good things. Bo Hughley, like I mentioned, Michael Uini, he's another guy who could be ready to play. I'm hearing Cortez Smith and Juan Gaston, the true freshmen, are coming in ready to play. And then the real project, 6'10", 350-pound Jazari Jackson, the offensive tackle who is converting over from basketball. Look, we thought that this would be a 3-year project. It sounds like in year 2 he might be ready to go and might be a guy that they struggle to keep off the field. I think he is that talented. So we've got to get these guys behind the starters some snaps and some reps. But if we do, I think that they will rise to the occasion.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I'm very interested to see. I think Georgia's season, I really, really, really feel like Georgia's season offensively goes as that offensive line goes, man. And maybe that's kind of cliche to talk about in football or something, but I think it really, really means that really depicts Georgia's season, how well that offensive line is able to build some continuity and get something going. Because last year it was not what Georgia fans had come to expect from Kirby Smart offensive lines. It was a different looking style of offense, and it was interesting to say the least, and actually sometimes kind of not that fun to watch. So we'll see what they can do as far as the offensive line. You mentioned the wide receivers earlier, Mason. We'll talk about those guys here for a second, but Zachariah Branch is making some noise at spring here, and really hearing that the offense, the passing game is going to be built around his abilities and a lot of his strengths, and going to be trying to find a lot of ways to get him the ball. I hear all that, but in my head, as a Georgia fan, I'm thinking, and I hate to say this, Mason, maybe this isn't a popular opinion, but I'm thinking, okay, Zachariah Branch, you've really got some work cut out for you now. You're at Georgia as a wide receiver, trying to be an elite player in the nation. I'm just really interested to see how this works. As a Georgia fan, obviously, I hope it works out really well. Obviously, for my own selfish reasons, because I love the Georgia Bulldogs. But I have doubts. There's been 1,000-yard receiver ever at the University of Georgia. And I get what Kirby Smart's doing. He's building something that's not centric around one player or one type. We want to be balanced. We want to have playmakers here and there and blah, blah, blah. Zachariah Branch needs to be fed until we all decide, okay, wait, we got to stop feeding him. I mean, this is an electric player. What do you think, Mason? He's making a lot of noise in camp. But I've seen this before, man, and Georgia is kind of the place where good wide receivers go to die. And not literally die, but maybe Georgia's where good wide receivers go to get arrested. How about that?
Yeah.
He hasn't been arrested yet. That's a great sign. Noah Thomas, we talked about it before we started recording. Haven't heard much about him in spring, but as a Georgia fan, again, we both were just talking about it. It might even just be a good thing that we're not hearing anything. because we just don't want to hear anything bad. No racing cars, no, getting an argument with your girlfriend and getting a domestic violence, like just stay out of the news and let's play football in the fall is kind of my thoughts on it, and we'll see what's up from there. Georgia obviously did well in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. We'll see how they're able to utilize it. What are your thoughts on the wide receiver position? Seems like there's a pretty good bit of depth, and you got some guys coming back, Dylan Bell, London Humphreys, but these are guys that got hit in the hands with the football last year and couldn't catch it. I'm hearing Dylan Bell's cross-training at running back. You know what I'm saying? So what are you hearing about the wide receiver position and the future of that position starting in 25?
Yeah, so I saw where somebody had made a comparison between Zachariah Branch and Arian Smith, saying, Zachariah Branch is going to come in and be the next Arian Smith for Georgia. I don't really see
not.
that. I don't really see that. I see Zachariah Branch as being more of a Dominic Lovett, who is hopefully more capable of catching a ball over the middle of the defense, because I saw a lot of Dominic Lovett, who we also said in spring ball and in fall camp was a guy who's expected to be a huge part of this offense. But every time he got an opportunity to run a slant across the middle of the field and catch the ball, he heard footsteps and he dropped the football. So he kind of got himself out of that game plan. I'm sure it's pretty easy to catch the football on a slant across the middle at practice when you know you're not going to get your block knocked off. But when you get out there in a real game situation, I think Lovett just really struggled with that. You saw a lot of reaching for the ball and not really catching it, up close to your body like you'd like to see on that slant route. So I'm hoping that Zachariah Branch is a little bit more of a Dominic Lovett as far as his role in this offense, but hopefully he has the confidence to catch the football over the middle and trust his quarterback to put him in a good situation. Noah Thomas, like you said, we're not hearing much about him, but what I am hearing is that the starting three wide receivers for Georgia, if they're in a three wide receiver set, it looks to be Noah Thomas, Colby Young, and Zachariah Branch, and that combination gives you a lot of options. You've got the speed with Zachariah Branch, and you've got a lot of length with Noah Thomas, as well as some speed, and then Colby Young, another lengthy receiver, but who can kind of do a little bit of everything. He's a decent route runner. He can go up and get the ball, great hands. And I'm expecting Colby Young and Noah Thomas to kind of both be similar type receivers in that vein. But nonetheless, I think Georgia's got three really good starting wide receivers. And then as far as buzz that I'm hearing behind those three, a lot of it's coming from Talon Taylor, the talented five-star wide receiver coming out of Illinois. It sounds like he's fitting the bill as being not just a technical route runner, a tactician at the wide receiver position, which I already knew that he was, but he's also kind of looking like a guy who's got some juice and can more, kind of like Zachariah Branch, somebody who can take the top off the defense at some point and really be explosive, a George Pickens type. And I guess I didn't really know if he had that in him as a wide receiver. I was thinking of him as more of a technical sort of guy. And then, of course, C.J. Wiley, 6'4" wide receiver as well, true freshman. He's another guy who's getting a lot of buzz. So there's a lot to like in this wide receiver room. It has undergone a complete overhaul for good reason. And I think that they're going to be in excellent shape this year. And then, I'll throw in the tight ends as well. There's not a whole lot changing here. Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, those are your guys. Ben Urosic, he's off to the NFL potentially. You've got Jaden Riddell. Sounds like he's taken a leap forward in his second season with the Bulldogs. And then Elias Williams, the five-star by some recruiting services tight end, the number one tight end in the country by some services. He's an absolute freak. I think he's a guy as a red zone target this year while he's trying to get his weight up, this being his first year in college. I think he's a guy who you might see line up out wide and go up and get the ball in some red zone situations.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the tight ends there. Georgia ain't got no talented tight ends, do they? Holy cow, they got three absolute studs. I feel like Riddell is going to be a real good one, as well. And Talon Taylor, I think, is a guy that you just mentioned who is coming in, obviously a 2025 recruit, a highly touted guy, number 23 overall player, as according to On3 anyway. Um, I think we need some production out of him. I do. I think he needs to be playing as soon as possible. I'm not saying starting, but we know how Georgia does. It's to play at Georgia is to rotate, right? Is you get snaps, first and second team throughout every game. We got to get something out of that guy. And he was just a big get in the 2025 class, and excited to see what he can bring to the offense. Let's talk defense for a minute. We talked about spring and some of the murmurs that are coming out of spring ball. More than a murmur coming out of spring ball about the defense for Georgia. How do I put this? I'll put it how I usually do. Fire hot, water wet, Georgia defense good. These are things that we've come to know about the earth. Okay? I don't have any reason to have any questions about Kirby Smart and his defense. I just don't. We're going to talk about it because it's fun to talk about, and there's so many studs. I mean, there's just studs everywhere. But keeping on the spring ball thing, C.J. Allen seems to be the guy that I'm hearing. This is not only his defense. It's not just his linebacker room. It's not just his defense. I'm hearing this is his team. That's what I'm hearing coming out of spring ball. And that is something that's really, really exciting for me. First of all, C.J. Allen played football 40 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. Local guy, okay? It means a lot to him. The state of Georgia means something to him at a Lamar County over there. And not to mention, I saw flashes of him last year that were just like, and by flashes, I mean, whoa, who was that? Like, it was literally a flash. The guy's got what it takes. He just needed some development. I suspect C.J. Allen is going to be the toast of the SEC as far as at that particular position at linebacker there. But Raylan Wilson is a guy I'm hearing a ton about. The biggest question, I guess, for me, I love those guys. I love some of those star players. Georgia loses a ton of depth on the defensive line. There was like a 8 or 9 man rotation last year. And there was no defensive lineman that was just like, whoa, that guy's a first round pick. There wasn't none of that, but there was a bunch of dudes that were like, hey, he could play in the NFL. He could play in the NFL. Like, it was consistent from the number 1 guy to the number 8 guy. You pretty much knew what you were going to get. You lose some of that experience. Xavier McLeod and Christian Miller have got to have a big season for Georgia. If Georgia wants to get where they want to go as far as possibly winning a national championship. Obviously, the number 1 goal for every team is make the college football playoff. But Xavier McLeod, Christian Miller, Jordan Hall, those guys got to go off, man. I mean, I don't know any other way to put that. You got some of the freshman star talent. Very few freshmen can contribute on the defensive line. So we'll see. I mean, Georgia always has really star-studded guys. We'll see if they're able to come in, pick it up quickly, and get out there and be productive for the defensive line. I personally am super excited about the secondary. Me personally, I am extremely excited to see what KJ Bolden is going to be able to do this year. With just having the whole year to himself and hoping he stays healthy. Obviously, I think that he's got a really, really good chance to have a great season. I'm happy with Dalen Everett, how his developments went. Daniel Harris, I think he'll be a little bit better. So I feel good about the linebacker and the secondary room. It's just all up to that defensive line group, to me, to depict where Georgia's season goes as far as the long haul in 2025. What are your thoughts on the defense? Who are some guys that you're hearing about? I'm hearing that the defense is dominating in spring ball. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
And I I don't think that's a huge surprise, especially considering some of the changes that have went on Georgia's offense with the wide receiver room and the offensive line. Doesn't really surprise me that the defense would be ahead of the offense. See ball, get ball is a totally different thing than running a structured offense. So, what are your thoughts on what we're hearing coming out of camp, and what's your kind of outlook for this defense going forward in 25?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. Look, you're
Me too.
losing 3 first-round draft picks and Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker, and Michael Williams. You're losing in total, what, 4, 5, 8 players off of the defense to the NFL, maybe 9 if Chaz Chambliss gets an invite. Um, that's a lot for any team to lose. It really is. However, I'm not going to say this. There's addition by subtraction, but there is a possibility for this defense to have gotten better, and in particular on the defensive line. Jalen, or excuse me, Michael Williams was banged up for most of the season. I think that we saw him healthy in some games, and we saw him absolutely wreck some games, but for about 80% of the season, he was banged up. So we didn't get him at 100%. Does a guy like a former 5-star and Joseph Jonah Ajonye, does he step up as a redshirt freshman and become that next Michael Williams? I'm hearing that he very well might. You've got a true freshman in Isaiah Gibson, former 5-star, who's also going to play defensive end out of Warner Robins. And it sounds like he's every bit fitting the bill as a guy who's probably going to contribute more on the back half of the season. Christian Miller he was a guy that must come back for Georgia because behind him, there's a lot of inexperience and youth talent for sure. You've got behind him Nnamdi Ogboku, who was the number 36 overall player in the country. He'll be in his second year at 6'6", and I don't know how much he's weighing these days, probably about 310 pounds, but a very, very talented young nose tackle behind Christian Miller. And then Xavier McLeod. I've liked everything I've seen out of McLeod. We haven't seen him play a ton. He's been kind of buried on the depth chart, but the South Carolina transfer has impressed me with his fire and his motor coming out of that defensive tackle position. And with him, kind of rotating, I don't know if I would necessarily say he's ahead of Jordan Hall, but I think McLeod and Hall are kind of 1A and 1B at that defensive tackle position and could probably both see the field in some sets. But Jordan Hall is a guy who's been banged up for the past 2 years. So with him healthy, I know he's a vocal leader. With him healthy, as a former 5-star himself, what is he going to contribute to this defensive line? And then the 5-star that everybody's talking about on campus that if you hadn't heard about him, you will. It's the defensive tackle Elijah Griffin out of Savannah. This guy, I'm hearing he's Jalen Carter 2.0. I'm hearing that there's not a more physically ready defensive tackle, true freshman, or defensive line true freshman in the entire country. And this guy at six, I think he's 6'4", 300 pounds. Just, I mean, he looks like he's NFL ready to play it on the defensive line. He's not going to be kept off the field. Elijah Griffin is a guy that you should be watching for Georgia for sure. Looking at the linebackers, you mentioned Gabe Harris and C.J. Allen. Love those guys. Or excuse me, Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen. I'll get to Gabe Harris in a minute. But behind them, I think Justin Williams and Chris Cole are equally as talented, and they're in year 2, they're ready to play. I think Chris Cole probably has a better opportunity to see more snaps because he's so versatile. You can put him at nickelback if you needed to. You can kind of put him all over the field with his length and his speed. But I'm hearing Justin Williams is just relentless, like a Nolan Smith type motor, but playing as a middle linebacker. I mean, scary sort of freak athlete. And he's not going to be denied playing time. So it'll be interesting how those 4 kind of work things out. And then behind them, you've got a true freshman 5-star running or linebacker coming in Zayden Walker as well. Another very talented guy. At the jack position, I mentioned Gabe Harris. I don't know. I think the jury's still out on Gabe Harris. He played pretty well last year. I saw him also kind of over pursue in some instances. But behind him, you've got the former quarterback, Quintavious Johnson, who's impressed ever since he got to campus last year. He's still learning, but the fact that he's already cracked the two deep in his second year after converting from quarterback, that's quarterback. He was throwing the football 2 years ago, and now he's playing on the defensive line or as an outside linebacker for Georgia. That's saying something. The guy's talented nonetheless. And then real quick on the secondary, I mean, we're good in a lot of situations in a lot of positions. So KJ Bolden, Dalen Everett, Janelle Aguero, I think those three are kind of locked up. Dalen Everett, I think, is going to be really a lockdown corner this year. He's progressed throughout his career, but I saw the most growth out of him last year throughout the year. He was pretty impressive to me. Safety coming over from Miami, believe it or not, Jaden Harris is a guy who looks to be locking down that strong safety position. I think that there's a battle going on between him and Kyron Jones. I'm also hearing Andre Evans, Ja'Cory Thomas, Zion Branch, Zachariah Branch's brother. They're all kind of in the mix there for that strong safety position. So we don't know who's going to play opposite of KJ Bolden as of yet. It'll probably be sort of a platoon there at that position. And then you got a battle going on at the other cornerback slot between Daniel Harris and the number, I think, 2 overall player, Ellis Robinson, who is a redshirt freshman this year. And by all accounts, everybody's telling, or all I've heard about him is that he's arrived as a cornerback. He's locked down. He's super smooth and just very sticky. But then Daniel Harris kind of adds a little bit of a different element in his size and his length that not a lot of cornerbacks have, and to have that and to be able to keep up with these wide receivers like he does, it's really impressive as a physical athlete. So a lot of competition going on the back end of the defense. Kirby and his crew wouldn't have it any other way. But I believe that this defense is probably going to be the best defense Georgia has had, I would say, since 2021, if I had to put money on it today.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it, man. I mean, Ellis Robinson is another one that I was trying to mention. And, I actually heard somebody call him Elias Robinson the other day. Somebody said that maybe his name was pronounced that way. I don't know. Just kind of peeking ahead, man, at the schedule for this season for the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm a little bit relieved to see that Georgia's got a couple of cupcakes to start the season. I think that that's helpful this season. Georgia has played so many opener big games. I'm a little bit happy as a Georgia fan to let's just get the season started and let's get some things in motion. Let's work a couple things out, specifically offensively, right? Because we've seen Georgia in the past come out in some of those big season openers and really kind of lay an egg on offense. Now, they've played some really good defenses, but, I mean, the defense is what carried Georgia through some of those victories. So I would like to see the offense be able to get their feet under them, score 50 points in a couple of those games. You know what I mean? Get some confidence and run through some things. Because week 3, you got Tennessee, and it's going to be at Tennessee. So I feel like that is it's obviously a big test for Georgia, but I feel like it is a turning point for Georgia's season one way or another. I think you win that game, you gather some momentum, you've got a week off immediately after, and then you're going to host Alabama at home. We all know what happened in that game last year. It was one of the craziest endings of a college football regular season game that I've ever seen. Definitely top 10, top 12, type game there. The big comeback by Georgia, who ended up losing at the last minute there. But then you've got, at Auburn in October that is interesting to me. I think Georgia has really kind of dominated Auburn over the last 20 years. So I think Georgia will be fine in that, but it's a game that kind of pokes out to me. But hosting Ole Miss in October, 1st of November, you're going to go to the neutral site game, obviously, in Jacksonville against Florida. But Texas in November, I think, is the biggest game on this schedule as far as the magnitude. Texas, I think, for everybody's money, is going to be the odds-on favorite to win the national championship this season. and or at least top 3. So obviously that'll be a big test for Georgia. Georgia dominated Texas last year. Georgia's defense dominated Texas last year. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. Can they do it again? It would be another. It would be very frustrating for the Texas Longhorns to be put in the chokehold like Georgia has put them in over the last couple games they've played. So that game, the intensity level is just going to be absolutely through the roof. What do you think about this schedule? Honestly, brother, I mean, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 4 that you really got to get up for. You got to make sure you're up for those. The rest of them, I'm not saying Georgia can roll their helmet out there and win them, but Georgia should be in good shape and should be a solid favorite in each of those games.
Yeah, but we said the same thing about the Georgia Tech game last year, and that was a nail biter that Georgia should have lost in some cases. Florida was a game that was closer than it probably had to be. It would have been much closer had DJ Lagway not gone out. So this is the new SEC. Out of those 6 games that I would say there are 6 games: Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Texas, and Georgia Tech. Out of those 6, I think Georgia wins 4. So I've got Georgia at 10-2 on the year. I don't know which 4 they're going to win. I don't know which 2 they're going to lose. But I think the days of undefeated seasons in the SEC have come and gone. If I had to guess, I'd say Georgia's probably going to lose that Saturday in Neyland at Tennessee. It'll be a similar wake-up call to the Alabama loss that they had last season early in the year. They get a bye to come off of that, and I think that everybody's going to be down on Georgia. And then they're gonna host Alabama and get the win that week against the Crimson Tide. And then you're probably going to lose one more somewhere. Maybe it's the Florida game. Maybe it's Texas. Maybe they finally get their win against Georgia and Kirby after losing 2 heartbreakers last year. But nonetheless, the schedule's not easy. I think Georgia fans are really excited about this schedule because of all the home games, the big home games that they get to play. But that doesn't make it any easier. This is another gauntlet of a schedule for the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, it certainly is. Any schedule in the SEC these days is going to be a gauntlet, no doubt, but certainly easier than last year. I mean, the schedule is a whole lot easier than last year, considering all these places. Georgia's hosting all these teams. They were all at their stadium last year. Obviously, all that stuff flip flopped. So, and you don't have the big neutral site, or excuse me, you don't have the big non-conference opener to worry about as well. I think this schedule is much more manageable this season. I think Georgia is much more equipped to be able to handle it. Just looking at some of those teams that are on that list, Texas is, obviously at best a toss-up, right? I mean, because Texas is one of the best teams in the country, but I haven't seen enough from Nico Iamaleava to say that he's going to be able to go out there and beat a real national championship contender. So I think Georgia is right on track to be 10-2, 11-1 in the regular season in 2025. It's how far Georgia goes beyond that, winning an SEC title, going to a college football playoff, winning a college football playoff game. That is going to all depend on this Georgia offense that we have got so many questions about going forward after last season. It's going to be the offensive line. Can they establish a run game for this offense? And how does Gunnar Stockton look at the helm, at the wheel? He's going to be pushing all the buttons. Really, really excited to see it. If you're a Georgia fan, come hang out with us here at First and Long College Football Show. We're going to be talking Georgia all year, but we don't just talk Georgia. We talk all the big teams in the country. There's about 60 teams that we're going to talk a lot about this season over the course of the season and the remainder of the offseason. We want you to come and join us here on the First and Long College Football Show, your go-to source for everything college football from the Pacific to the Atlantic. We thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all have a great day.